Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is the Digitally Uploaded podcast, and I'm Matt Sainsbury. I'm the editor-in-chief of digitallydownloaded.net. With me this week, we have two people. Harvard. Hello, Harvard.
Morning, guys.
And we have Ginny. Hello, Ginny.
Hey, how's it going?
All good, all good. Getting straight into it. The news of the week, I guess for me, the highlight of the week was Hyaki Castle, which is a game probably nobody's heard of, but it kind of came out on PC and didn't create much of a splash, unfortunately, but it's a really, really, really good dungeon crawler about Japanese mythology and yokai and all that kind of cool stuff, and it's quite a dark kind of dungeon crawler, and it is coming to console, which is a really good thing. I think dungeon crawlers work better on console, and I think it will get a better audience there, so I'm very excited for this. This comes out at the end of the month. It was announced and not long away to wait, which is really good, and very excited for that. I don't know if either of you have heard of Hyaki Castle, but I would highly recommend you look into it now that I've told you about it. What about you, Ginny? What's that?
I only vaguely know about it.
Okay, well, now you can read the review on digitallydownloaded.net because it's a very good review that I've already written of the PC version, and then you can look forward to me raving about it a bit more, I guess, once I get my hands on the console version. It's coming out on PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch, and we all know that means everybody's going to get the Switch version because got to play it portable. So, Ginny, what about you? What's your highlight of the news of the week?
Cool. My highlight, I'm hungover. My news of the week is Cecilia's story, Cecilia D'Anastasio over at Kotaku, basically having put out an article after 6 months of investigating, putting out an article about the workplace practices at Riot Games and how, aside from the glaring corporate culture issues that are at Riot Games that influence HR stuff, the element of sexism and harassment that also underscores that. So big expose for a very big company that's currently on the, on the verge of doing very big things and expanding its franchising system. So it looks like so far a lot of people that work at Riot have acknowledged that this sexism and stuff is real and that they understand and are trying to work within the company to change it. So a response from Riot so far has been, not horrific. But I guess we'll watch the space. We'll see if this is sort of the purge moment that Riot needed to pull its head out of the ground and to actually start changing the way its culture works. But check it out. I think it's really interesting to read.
Yeah, I mean, true story, I actually applied to a job at Riot once upon a time, many years ago now, and while I'm not a woman, obviously, and didn't have to deal with the sexism stuff, a lot of what was actually written about the recruitment process in that expose, I can confirm is quite true because a lot of it applies to, I guess, everybody that must apply to Riot because it's a pretty crappy company and never play League of Legends. Harvard. Harvard, what about you? What's your news story of the week?
Well, to start off, a year after quitting League of Legends, hearing that news is like interesting. I'm glad I'm out. My news is there's a soft launch this week for this puzzle game, I think just on tablets and mobiles, called Valleys Between. And that's a game developed by a New Zealand developer called Little Lost Fox. And it is kind of like this world-building hex puzzle game, and it just looks really, really gorgeous. So if you need something to play on the go and you've just got like a tablet or a phone, and I think it's only in Australia, New Zealand though, be sure to take a look at that.
Yes, and support New Zealand developers.
Yeah.
They're in such a tiny corner of the earth, they need all the support they can get.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. It's true. All right, so we're going to get to some music, and because Alan's not on the podcast this week to moderate what music I choose, I have picked the song that is going to annoy him the most when he's editing this. And hi, Alan. I'm sorry, not sorry for this, but this is what happens when I research music quite drunk at midnight the night before. So enjoy, and we are going to come back and we'll talk about something. We're not quite sure just yet.
Let's go party. Come on, Bobby, 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 let's go party.
Welcome back, everybody. So, for the first part of the podcast this week, we are going to talk about something not so pleasant. I promised later on in the podcast we talk about really cool things like Girls Phantasia, and you're going to want to stick around for that conversation. But we're going to get the serious topic out of the way first. We are going to talk about hunting. Hunting games are, well, they're prevalent to say the least. I think there was a new one that was announced this week, a proper serious hardcore hunting simulator. Obviously, Monster Hunter is a hunting game. By default, it's in the name. That's why it's called Hunter. And yeah, I mean, hunting mini games are a big part of just about every open world experience that you can buy, especially if it's from Ubisoft or Square Enix or whatever. And I wanted to talk about it because I can't stand hunting. I think hunting is the worst sport, and I put that in inverted commas. It's not a sport; it's a joke. I think it is. I think it's disgusting, and I think these games are disgusting. And while it's easy enough to ignore a hunting simulator because that's what it is, one of the things that really frustrates me is games like Tomb Raider or like Far Cry or whatever that put hunting as a mini game or a side thing into their games and then effectively force you to do it if you want to get progression through the game. They lock important upgrades behind your ability to kill animals and get the pelts and whatever. And without it, you could probably still finish the game, but it becomes very difficult. And I really don't like that. If you're going to put hunting into a game as that's not a hunting game, if you're going to put it in as a side quest, side story, side mission, whatever you want to call it, then make it genuinely optional, because it's going to piss me off if I have to play it. And yeah, that's not cool. People should have the choice whether they want to indulge in hunting, because it's not a pleasant sport for a lot of people. And that's my thoughts. Ginny, what about you? Where do you stand on hunting games?
Well, for me, it's kind of like a size thing that makes it a hunting game. So I don't like Hunting Simulator because you're hunting defenseless animals. But I'm okay with Monster Hunter World, where I am trying to defend myself against a giant fire-breathing dragon lizard that's literally killed me like 69 times already.
Well, just walk away from it.
You can't. Look, when you post the quest, they chase after you. They're very, 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 very persistent.
Well, that's bad quest design then, isn't it?
And like, I understand as well, like, the problem is though, like, I say this now and try and like justify, being okay with it. But like towards the end of a hunt, when you weaken the monster, it starts running away. And by then I've had enough of that monster's shit that I'm just like, you know what? Fuck you. Don't run away from me. So I go over there into its house and finish the job. So
Into its house.
Yeah, well, because it runs back to its home and it tries to rest, and you're like, no, you die here in your own bed. So yeah, but I mean, as awful as that sounds, I don't think it's at all like playing Hunting Simulator, like, the one where you shoot deer or rabbits or bears or whatever. Like, I feel like the monster hunting thing is a completely different realm, because they are out there to kill you, and like, they just do casual drive-bys on your home as and when they feel like it. Like, you need to, there's an element there of defense. Admittedly, as part of the game, you're incentivized to take it too far. But I mean, the game does ask you to capture monsters for studying instead. And like you're like, oh, it's not so bad. And then you come back and then the research is like, well, we were done with it. So here's half a lung. And I'm like, oh shit, you killed it. So yeah, I don't know. Monster Hunter is a game that I think recognizes that dissonance between, I guess, wanting to keep the world, the whole, kumbaya ecosystem thing and the killing. I think it gets a dissonance and it kind of tries to address that humorously, but kind of falls flat. I guess what I'm trying to say is I hunt monsters, not deer. So I have that mental distinction whereby a deer is a sad small animal that I must protect, but a fire-breathing monster I must attack. So there you go.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we don't actually talk much about Monster Hunter as a hunting game, and people who might, like yourself, might have an issue with hunting don't seem to have an issue with Monster Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, probably a big part of it is that these things are more modeled after, I guess, the kind of the dragons of fantasy and whatever. They are actually monsters, and monster always implies something distinct from the natural world as such.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of where the word monster comes from. It implies that it's not natural, therefore, as something that's unnatural, it's okay to kill it. Yeah, it's an interesting way that they put that distinction in there. I've certainly played a lot of monster hunting games in the past. I don't have the same resistance to playing them that I have with Cabela's Hunting Simulator or whatever that crap's called. But yeah, I'm certainly aware that it is still effectively a hunting game as such.
Mm.
I haven't played Monster Hunter World, I must admit. I played the ones on the DS a lot, the 3DS a lot.
Yeah, they're like a lot.
I'm also really terrible at the game, so I kind of give up on them very quickly. I can't actually even kill one of those jaggy things by myself. I need somebody to walk me through those games, and I think I test the patience of pretty much anybody I'm playing with. So I always feel bad. I feel like I'm like the reason that the team loses. So I always give up. That's just me. Harvard, what about you? I'm sure you're a huge fan of the hunting games, right?
Ooh. I mean, to start off, I think it's interesting in Monster Hunter because the hunting there is so mechanically difficult and challenging. It's kind of like the monsters are huge and there's so much strategy involved. Whereas I find it weird playing a hunting game if you're just like tracking a moose or something and just kind of standing around and you just shoot it. And then I don't see how people can derive satisfaction from that. I mean, they have that as a side thing in a lot of games. Like, I know that I was playing a lot of Just Cause the other day, and there's just some animals, like there's moose and stuff, or not moose, deer, I think, and they just kind of chill around. And if you want to, you can shoot them. But I think, like, why would you ever want to do that? And it's the same with a game like Far Cry. They have, I think, buffalo or something, and they give you achievements for shooting them. And I just think, like, why would anyone want to do that?
Yeah, and you've got to do that with Far Cry to get good upgrades and stuff from memory. One of the things I liked about Dynasty Warriors 9 was it did have hunting in there, but it was really genuinely optional, and you weren't disadvantaging yourself if you didn't go and track down tigers and stuff. I like that, and I like when I've got no problem with developers putting those kinds of mechanics in there for people that I guess like them, but I do prefer when they are completely optional. One thing that's
actually one exception to that rule. I don't know if you've played the original Sleeping Dogs, but there's cockfighting in that game, and to their credit, they've like hit it really, really well. It's like almost like some gambling den on the side of the map. It's impossible to find, but when you get there, you can get achievements for winning money in cockfights. And I'm just thinking, like, I really, really wish this was not in this game. Like, I know this whole like Chinese triad gangster theming, but please, like, why did you put this in here?
Yeah, it's funny. One thing I did want to mention is I don't have the same issue with fishing games. In fact, I really like fishing games. I have quite a few of them, and that includes the kind of the more serious ones, like what is it called? Rapala, I think, is the fish. Like, it's the actual fishing line fishing manufacturer, and then they have a series of games that's named after it, licensed after it. Anyway, I actually play those kinds of serious fishing games, but I think in my head canon, I release the fish after catching them. I don't eat them. So I guess that's kind of where I logic my way around, so I can actually enjoy those games. I don't know. I like fishing. Fishing's good. In real life, I can't catch a fish to save my life, so I never had to make that choice about whether to actually put it back in the water or not. They just, I can't catch them. They don't like me or something. But yeah, fishing games I'm cool with. Hunting games I'm not. And Monster Hunter, I don't know. I still think you should just move on. Relocate.
It's not that easy when there's a giant, like, island-sized monster about to, on like a collision course with your island, about to kill you. Like, you can't relocate the island. It's not that easy.
You could if you wanted to, Ginny. That's the thing. If there was enough of the desire there, you'd be able to. I think that's it.
This turns into a conversation of how far would you go to not hunt?
Yeah, that's right.
Monster anti-hunter world. Just like
On that note, we'll go to some music and we'll come back and we'll talk about something very different.
ドアを開けたら妻が倒れてる背中に突き刺さる包丁床は血まみれ知らない人が見たら気絶するかもしれない僕が落ち着いて今日のは掃除が大変そうだと笑うと妻はうつ伏せのまま満足そうにふくふと笑ってた家に帰ると妻が必ず死んだふりをしています明日はどんな死に方しているのか予想すらできないある日は頭に矢が刺さってたり軍服で銃抱えたりマンボウの着ぐるみが死んでた時はどう決めようかと思ったあと片付けも結構大変で床の血のりを洗ったり矢が刺さったまま晩ご飯作るのは勘弁してほしい家に帰ると妻が必ず死んだふりをしていますちょっと褒めると調子に乗るからできるだけするで結婚前は忙しくても彼女に会うだけで楽しかった徹夜で車でもなく飛ばして海に行ったりしたのに結婚直後初めて部下を持ち仕事がとても楽しくなった家で一人で待つ妻の気持ちを考えていなかった家に帰ると妻が必ず死んだふりをしてるのはあの頃の二人に戻りたいからか僕にはわからない家に帰った僕を待ってる妻の演技見ることが僕ら二人の愛の形ならばそれはそれでありだろう家に帰ると妻が必ず死んだふりをしています今日はどんな死に方しているのか期待して開けるドア
And welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. That was some more Vocaloid music. Again, because Alan's not around, I have all the power of control over which music tracks are played, and I'm going all Vocaloid this week. He is going to hate me for this. So for the second section of the podcast, we wanted to talk about something that I think a lot of people don't really think about when it comes to Japanese games, and that's the sense of spirituality that is running through a lot of them, or most of them, or an awful lot of them anyway. And that kind of came because, firstly, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, Hyaki Castle was announced for consoles, and that's a game that's very heavily rooted in Japanese spiritual tradition and mythology. And also, Okami was released on the Nintendo Switch, about the 10th time that game's been released on some platform or another, and nobody ends up buying it. But please buy it this time around, because it really is that good, and it really finally deserves to be a commercial hit for Capcom. They keep releasing it. Hopefully the Switch version does well. But those games are both really good examples, I guess, of the Shinto faith being represented through a video game. And it's a religion that we don't think about a lot outside of Japan because it isn't present outside of Japan. It is basically a Japan-only kind of faith. And a lot of people who go to Japan don't really recognize the difference, I think, a lot of times between Shinto and Buddhism, which are the two dominant religions over there. But they are very different. And Shinto is a very ancient religion, and I think the way it shows up in video games a lot is that a core belief for Shinto is that everything has some kind of spiritual force to it, whether it's a living or inanimate object. There's some kind of spiritual power in it, and that often manifests itself through spiritual animals, and all of that kind of stuff. So when you see fox motifs throughout Japan, that is the Shinto faith talking. And even you can kind of trace back to even Japan's love of mascots as I guess a manifestation of that idea that everything has some kind of spiritual power behind it, and some kind of personality, and some kind of relatable again, personality. So I don't know. Is that something that, I mean, when you've been playing these kinds of games, especially something like Okami, do you ever kind of stop and think about the way it kind of presents a spirituality?
To me, I find what's interesting is that you get a sense that there's no traditional good or evil in a lot of games like this. It's more kind of the spiritual world has its own intentions and its own interpretations of what's happening, and the humans will have a different interpretation. And so there's a conflict born there that's not always the same things that we see in Western games, where it's like, we're the good guys, we shoot the bad guys. It's like, it makes for a much more interesting narrative experience. I actually haven't played Okami. It's currently downloading right now.
Oh my!
Well, no, it's downloading. You know,
Okay.
It's downloading. Next week I'll be fixed. But one of the first Shinto-inspired games I played was actually as a review for digitally downloaded, called 99 Spirits, and it was this game about inanimate objects developing, I guess, becoming possessed by spirits, and then having to actually talk to them and figure out like what are their desires, and then actually try to fix that. And that's something that I've always wanted out of a game, to really flesh out that idea of, I guess, almost being like a spirit detective. So you're going around the countryside, and there's these things there's the spirits that have troubles, and you fix them, and it'll be so great. Everyone will play that. It'll be awesome.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the kind of the morality, because one of the things, for instance, my wife is Japanese, always compares her religion to is the kind of the Greek gods of old, where they kind of, I mean, in our modern religions, we see, the God as the all-perfect kind of being, or at least that's certainly the way of the Judeo-Christian tradition. But to Shinto and to the kind of the old Greek gods and all that kind of stuff, they weren't perfect beings in themselves. They had their own passions. They had their own flaws, character flaws, and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, you definitely see through a lot of Japanese games that are inspired by Shinto faith that the god creatures are not perfect beings in themselves, and not necessarily good for humanity. I think a good example of that, which is also coming out on the Nintendo Switch soonish, I believe, in the West, is God Wars, which is a tactics RPG. And I recommend anybody who's interested in Shinto faith check that one out as well, because it's actually very much inspired by what we're talking about as well. What about you, Ginny? Any particular games kind of stand out for you as something that has educated you or made you interested in the Shinto faith?
Yeah, well, I'm Buddhist. So I've always been kind of aware of the Shinto faith from, I guess, maybe like an academic interest perspective, because the Buddhism that's practiced in Singapore is not really, I guess, fundamentally traditional Buddhism as it is from England. I think I'm from England, sorry, from India. Jeez, from England. God no. From India, it's not like traditional Buddhism in a way, and I think that the practices that we have in some of, I guess, that part of Asia, I think we do kind of take into account and do think about some of what the Shinto faith thinks about, which is not so much just Buddhism by being altruistic, but also Buddhism through rituals and, honoring and celebrating the existence of, the forces that kind of control nature, or I said in, I guess, Shinto law and Shinto religion to contribute to nature. And surprisingly, this is a game that Matt has played and has stopped playing like a fool. It's Final Fantasy 14. The latest expansion, Stormblood, actually has a boss fight with Susanoo, who I believe in Shinto lore, if that's the right way to say what it is, he is the Shinto god of the sea and the storms. And the boss fight, I guess, involves him channeling the seas and the storms against you. But also, I think the part of that game and its newest expansion that really kind of ties together all the Shinto stuff about gods and not, gods not being, I guess, black and white, and your wife's comparison to the Greek gods, I guess. This obviously huge spoilers, but it's gonna happen. Yeah, it's like a side quest thing. It's not integral to I guess the main story. But what really happens is you come across these animals. So some really, really cute animals, like tiny turtles and tiny foxes and stuff, and you meet them, and they bring you kind of fight your way through this volcanic underground dungeon filled with these cute animals. And you're like, what the fuck is happening here? Like, what's going on? You get to the very end, and there's the animals have built a shrine. So there's like a shrine that looks like, I guess, your stereotypical Shinto shrine, and the animals explain to you that they are animals that have lived an existence so fraught with I guess trauma and good and bad, that at a certain age they've ascended and they've become spirits, and now their job as animals is to traverse the world and to try and protect it from the other forces and the other anima and the other animals around it that all have differing wants and needs and lusts and passions. So basically, you get like a troop of tiny raccoons, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to I guess enforce their one brand of what they see as the best outcome for the world versus, I don't know, the sect of tiny tigers or the sect of tiny foxes kind of thing. So I found that interesting, like the way that that whole sort of quest line is really about the danger as well of deifying one particular thing, because it kind of talks about how one animal friend of theirs was worshipped as a god solely by one cult, and then they became too powerful and too crazy and too destructive. And so there's a whole quest line there about managing, I guess, the good and the evil within you, and how no one is really good or evil. It's all just about how your actions are perceived within the world and what you do. So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
It is. It's still not enough to convince me to go back to
Oh,
Final Fantasy
come on.
14.
They're so cute, man. Think about all the tiny turtles going, we're doing this for the good of the universe. They're so cute. Come back.
I wish I had the time for that game.
Uh,
It would be nice.
mm.
MMOs, they're terrible like that. But on that note, we'll go to some more music. And incidentally, it's my belief anyway, that the whole Vocaloid thing actually comes in part from that Shinto view of the world. Because if you think about it, I've got a theory about this. If you think about it,
we're going places.
we are. If you think about it, we had music, or we had software that had a voice in the past. They had for example, the Apple the word processor was able to read back the text that you typed in, and that was decades and decades ago. It was only when they came up with some technology in Japan, and their first thought was to give that technology, that bit of software, a character and a personality as such, and that's where Vocaloids came from. Effectively, I think that is actually something that is a kind of it could only come from a country that had a religion like Shinto, where for thousands of years people have been taught to kind of see personality in everything that they kind of experience in the world. So yeah, that's my theory. We'll go to some more Vocaloid music, and we'll come back and we'll talk about something very different. And welcome back, everybody. So for the last part of our podcast this week, we are going to talk about a game that is mind-blowing in a way. Ginny and I have both been playing a game that was released in English in Asian markets, not in Western markets, because it would be banned pretty much instantly across the board in Western markets. The game is called Uploade Girls Phantasia. It's a PlayStation 4 exclusive, I think. Maybe there's a Vita version. I don't know. We've been playing it on PlayStation 4, and it comes to us from the same mob that brought us Oni-Chanbara and Schoolgirl Zombie Hunter. But it makes those games look pretty tame by comparison. This game is pretty eye-opening, and yeah, I think we both agree on that. And that's coming from people that have basically played everything that's pervy out there.
Mm-hmm.
And this one still managed to impress us with how far it was able to take stuff without actually going all the way into, actual pornographic games. I think this one pushes right up against the line, I think, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, it's very there's a lot of pushing, and a lot of strategically placed straps of clothing to
Not just pushing, also lots of prodding too.
Yeah, there's prodding. There's a lot of eating and a lot of milk. So I think if we just put all those elements together, that might give you an idea of what Bullet Girls Fantasia is like. But when Matt told me to get it, I didn't want to spoil myself, so I didn't look at anything. I didn't watch any trailers before I bought it. I just thought I trust Matt intrinsically, even though we had a very heated disagreement about whether or not Opie was great. I think it's great. Matt not so much. But even though we disagree on what we find most attractive on anime women, I thought, you know what? Matt's a great editor, great guy. I trust his opinion on a good game. So I downloaded it and I was not prepared. I'm thinking about nothing Matt could have said could have prepared me for this. Because if Matt had said that I would be playing a game whereby I have to gently force feed ice cream to a girl while also putting milk on her because that may be something that she gets subjected to if she's captured by enemy forces and tortured, I would have said, what? And and my second reaction might have been, I think I've seen that video somewhere, but it wasn't about a game.
I think we should probably take a step back and explain to the poor listeners have no idea what this game's about. It's kind of broken up into two things. One part of the game, one half of the game is effectively Dynasty Warriors if Dynasty Warriors didn't play well, and you go through levels killing hordes of orcs and skeletons and slimes and all those kind of fantasy staples on your way to a boss battle or whatever. And each of your characters has a gun, or most of the characters have a gun, and it's a kind of a mix between shooter and Dynasty Warriors. And then the second part of the game, and we think that this is actually the part of the game they developed first and then created the Dynasty Warriors thing just to give them an excuse to put it into something, is a kink torture mini game is the best way to describe it. So you've captured a character, and to get them to join your team, you need to subject them to poking, prodding, force feeding of ice creams and other circular objects, cylinders, kind of cylinder-shaped objects, very suspiciously cylinder-shaped. You get to squirt them with water pistols and all that kind of stuff. And funnily enough, all of that stuff is not really stuff that hasn't been in games before. They do have, like, if you play enough Compile Heart games, for example, you'll come across most of these kinds of mechanics. But Bullet Girls really takes things to another level entirely, and it really does push as far as it possibly can to still be allowed to be released on PlayStation by Sony, because Sony doesn't allow actual adult games onto the console. This is about as close as you can get to an actual adult game on the PS4, I think. Oh, and the other mechanic I forgot to mention is that as the girls take damage, rather than bleeding like you'd expect from a shooter, their clothes just rip off. I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, but my first clue that I suppose this was a game that had the kind of story and fighting stuff designed around the sex stuff was probably when I launched it up and the game explained to me, like, I guess it explained the trailer, the cutscene explained to me what was happening in the game world. And it was like, once upon a time, elves and men locked away this giant demon underground with the help of a dragon. 1,000 years later, the dragon's breaking out. And then all of a sudden, your modern day girls get thrown into a fantasy universe to help defeat the evil dragon and orcs. And I was like, okay, they've put no effort into the plot. Someone clearly has just thought, I'll throw together some random stuff that I found on the ground from discarded bad storylines and use that. Like, there is absolutely no effort at all to actually make the plot workable, sense.
It's almost like one of those how the porn industry has all kinds of satires of legitimate films. It's almost like it's kind of a porn parody of a legitimate game, really.
100%. And I mean, it was just that. But I kind of admire the fact that they've just completely, just unabashedly dedicated themselves to delivering this kinky touching experience. Like,
I'm
Like,
honest, I'm honestly
listen.
amazed that they've managed to create something that's more extreme than Schoolgirl Zombie Hunter. I really thought that was about as far as it was going to go. This publisher I thought that was the limit to what the publisher was going to be able to achieve, but they managed to one up me. So, yeah, I'm not going to be surprised by what this publisher comes up with anymore. I think whatever comes next, it's going to be somehow even more amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure it will just be bigger and bustier. But honestly, like the thing with this game is if you at all think, if you looked at this game and thought, it's got some shooting stuff, like I'm sure I'll enjoy the combat. Do not buy this game for the combat. Let me just tell you that right now. The maps are ugly. Okay, the maps are ugly. The enemies are repetitive. They pose no threat pretty much whatsoever. When you're fighting and you have when you fight, the environment is very glitchy as well. Like I think I've dodged, rolled, / thrown myself through a mountain. So I don't even know how that happened, but it did. Like they have not put any effort into making the game enjoyable from a combat perspective. Okay, this is as bare bones as it gets. So if you think that, the pervy stuff kind of weirds me out, I'll just play for the shooting. There's not going to be enough shooting to make it worth your while. Okay, I just make that very clear for you. It's not a game that you can just kind of, I'll play the combat. It's not one of those like, this game is mechanically sound. Who minds the pervy stuff? No. The combat side of the game is not at all mechanically sound. I'm just going to put it out there right now.
Yeah, it's weird though because the game's fun.
Oh yeah, no, it's fun.
That's the thing. It's one of those weird things. People, I mean, objectively, because apparently we can look at these things objectively. Objectively, it's a terrible game, absolutely dismal. But somehow these games are fun, and it's not just this one. This is the same publisher. Like I said, Schoolgirl Zombie Hunter was somehow fun despite being terrible. Onitshabara is somehow fun despite being terrible. Earth Defense Force, which actually comes from the same publisher, is terrible, but those games are a lot of fun. Those games don't have sex in them, so they tend to sell well, and it's kind of the major franchise, I guess, for that publisher. But yeah, they just take these really B-grade, trashy ideas, and despite having absolutely no coding skill behind them, they're enjoyable. I guess that's kind of a coding skill, isn't it? But yeah, by no standard way of looking at these games, and it's hard as a critic to talk about something like this because on the one hand I do really enjoy it, on the other hand I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to anybody except for you, Ginny. I knew you would like it. I knew you would like it.
Yeah, well,
I always knew.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that I'm a very open-minded critic. I review a lot of games, so I got to keep an open mind, an open perspective, and see the beauty in everything. And there's definitely a lot of art in this game, maybe not in the environments, but there's a lot of artful animation. There's a lot of symbolism in here, even though it's not very subtle. And, it's just a very uplifting title. So I think if you want a good time and you don't really care about how you get there, this is the game for you.
Well, they did go to a lot of effort to design the underwear.
Oh, yeah, no, the outfits are beautifully realized. Like, honestly, there's a lot.
They tear perfectly.
Yeah, the way that they've constructed the armor to look great while it's in a tattered state is impressive. The attention to detail, that you can clearly see when your character's brassiere rips. Like it's just, I can tell that someone has spent so much time beautifully crafting these outfits, and I respect that. I respect that artist. So,
and I just noticed now that we're getting close towards the end of the section. Harvard hasn't actually mentioned a word this whole section. I think we've scared him.
I think Harvard's Googling how to erase us from the earth.
Yeah, I think he's got his hands across his ears, and he's just like, no.
Can I just give some context? I found out with this game this morning before the podcast by watching a 5-minute trailer, and now I'm listening to Matt and Ginny talk about it. And can I just say, do not watch the trailer. It will ruin condensed milk for you forever.
Yeah. It will ruin all dairy products for you. Let's be real here. Like, let's just, because I mean, the game ruins ice cream for you anyway. So.
I was going to say it also ruins ice cream, water gun fights. What else does it ruin?
Pacifiers.
So,
well, I mean, not that
if your pacifiers haven't already been ruined for you, I mean, let's face it.
Do that.
I mean, depending on what you're into, it probably ruins sexuality in general. So
yeah, there you go.
yeah, it's an interesting one. Like we said at the start, if you are interested in the game after listening to us talk about it, you cannot get it in the West because I think the publisher wisely realized they shouldn't bother trying to go through the classification boards of countries like Australia and New Zealand. You can grab it from the Hong Kong PlayStation store in English. You just need to buy yourself some Hong Kong PlayStation credit, which you can do from various outlets. And once you're there, you're
in.
right. Yeah, it's actually the localization itself is actually good quality. It's not a Google Translate localization. So yeah, if as long as you're willing to sign up for a Hong Kong PlayStation Network, if you haven't already got one, and I recommend you do anyway because you needed that to get Dead or Alive Extreme 3, and you should definitely have that game. That's a good game. Yeah, you can play it without any concerns. And on that note, that's pretty much the podcast for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, be sure to grab us on social media to chat about what we've chatted about today. And do let us know if there's anything that you'd like for us to cover in a podcast. We're always looking for interesting topic ideas. So, yeah, let us know. And otherwise, we will see you all next week. Thanks for joining Harvard and Jimmy.
Thanks for listening.
I'll just look off.
建て替えたっての感情なんて全て後半可能なんてそんなのは他と違い笑わせないでよねだけどたまには楽しいことも必要だと思うの気がするまで私も満足した日は雨の前から消えていった心さす嘘みたいにくるくるってわかるようなこの感じがたまらないねうお茶の会ならお話をもっと本気にさせてみてるなんて許さないわやっぱりそんなってどうなのかしら嬉しいとか気持ちいいとか所詮それは自己満足そういうのってなぜ捨てちゃっていいんじゃないって思わせてもぶっとっちゃったらいいでしょ言いたいとこに不満があるのいっそこうなったら逃がさないだからねお金覚悟してさどうなっちゃってもいいからその手で最後まで見届けて